All right, so this is the second video in the genetics and learning. And what we want to talk about this time is genetic influence. We want to talk about some very basics on genetics. Now, in a basic bio class, we would talk about the father of genetics, which is Gregory Mendel, and he is famous. He was a monk and he worked on pea plants. His job in the monastery was actually he fed the other monks, and he grew crops. He was a scientist in his own right, and he noticed things about pea plants. He noticed that they came in a variety of different traits. The flowers were either purple or white. The seed color was either yellow or green. They came either smooth or wrinkled. So lots of different things that he noticed about him, and he put that into a scientific study. And what he realized is that we have things called genes. Now, he did not coin that term, but he did come up with the idea of how these genes can be passed on to future generations, and we'll talk about that in a second. Now, for humans, I love it. When I first started teaching biology, we were taught that we had 100,000 genes. We just assumed that we were so special that we needed lots of genes to become as complex as we are. Over the years, we have figured out we are probably down to 25 to 30,000 genes. There are animals and plants that actually have more genes than we do. You know, we're leaning toward the 25,000. I've heard numbers as low as 18,000, although I'm not sure that's true. But anyway, that probably doesn't matter quite as much. You know, it's just to understand, to get who we are, we have all these different genes. And some of those genes are structural for physical structures, and then some are regulatory on how much protein's made, how many hormones are made. So with those variations, we get who we are today. And what Mendel came up with is that there are these things called alleles, and these are different versions of genes. And so he's looking at the flowers on this one, and purple versus white flowers. And the idea is there's different forms, and you inherit one from mom and one from dad. And so what happens is we have these terms, and I want you to know these terms. We have homozygous and heterozygous. And homo means the same, and hetero means different. So homozygous means that the two genes that you have, the one that you inherited from mom and from dad, one from dad, are the same. So they could be you inherited both of the purple flower gene. Heterozygous means you got one purple and one white. One parent gave you the purple, one parent gave you the white. And then we have this concept, and not all genes do this, but most genes are dominant or recessive. In other words, if you have the dominant gene, that is the one that shows up most often. And then if you are recessive, that is the one, and let me rephrase that. Dominant doesn't mean that it's shows up the most often. It means that it is, if you have both, it will show up. Okay, it can be a dominant gene and actually be fairly rare. For instance, with purple, we're going to use the letter P to represent that. So if you are homozygous dominant, it means you have two large P's in your flower that would be purple. If you are heterozygous, you would have a large P and a small p, but your flower would still be purple because purple is dominant over white. To be recessive, you would need actually the two small p's. So the only way you're going to be a white flower is both of your parents are either white or they are heterozygous and they both have that hidden gene. All right, and so this is kind of showing what they mean by that. And so you can see that a purple and a white flower can end up with purple flowers as kids. The F1 generation just means they're kids. F2 means you take their kids and then you breed them again. And so what you can see, we get these ratios with heterozygous with two different parents, two homozygous parents that are different. You will end up with a 3-to-1 generation. 3 of them will be purple, 1 will be white. And this is really what Mendel came up with. And so again, just to reiterate, genotype is the information on the genes, and phenotype is the express. So if I was to ask you genotypes, it would be these letters, and then phenotypes would actually be the colors of the flowers. And just to give you one last example here, this is a real life example. There are a single gene in the breeding behavior of rough males. And you can see here we have 2 different types of males. They look different. One of them is a satellite male and one is an independent male. Okay, so it turns out the independent male down here on the bottom, what that means is it has a little territory, and it attracts females to that territory and for breeding. And so this is the independent male, and he is actually homozygous recessive. But they found that there is another group of males that are called satellite males, and they are homozygous dominant or heterozygous. And what they do is they don't have their own territories. They will actually come into another male's territory and dance with them. And the male tends to tolerate that. I guess multiple dancers will bring in more females. And so again, we found that it is a single expression gene. Again, the birds look different and their behaviors are different. And so we will end the recording.